Hey guys, so today was going to be the beginning of our chapter in ecology, and unfortunately I don't get to see you guys in person, so I'm going to go ahead and present what I was going to have you do here on my computer, and then I'll push this out to you and have you guys get some notes down and kind of get a general idea of what ecology is or what an ecologist does, and so we'll do that today. I'm limited at 15 minutes here, so I might talk fast, I might kind of move quickly, pause it when you need to, and take the notes as you go, okay? But yeah, we're going to talk about ecology as it refers to kind of the environment around us and the things that live around us and the interactions that take place between not just the living but the non-living things. And so that's, that's a huge thing right now, especially when you talk about hot topics like climate change and, how things are responding to, well, even pandemics. So, even humans can be looked at under a microscope when it comes to this umbrella of biology known as ecology, okay? So I've defined it here. Go ahead and pause it for a second. And, any of the notes we have down today, go ahead and take those. All right, but this is just a couple of ways of defining ecology. And like I said, it's not only the living environment, it's the non-living environment too, okay? So jot that down and we'll continue on, okay? Populations is a big topic. I took a number of classes when I went to Northwest a long time ago. Took a lot of classes that dealt with ecology. I mean, I was an ecology major, and a lot of times we looked at populations. We looked at not just the populations of, humans. We looked at and the sort of the damage that we have as our population starts to get bigger. But even just populations of fruit flies. We looked at populations of birds and just depending on what class you took. And those populations are sort of a guideline to an ecologist of how the environment's doing. So when it comes to like birds, for instance, you might go ahead and take data every single year in the same location that might be a high migratory place for birds. So a bunch of birds coming through as they migrate from, let's say, Canada down to Central America. And if you see those numbers starting to go down, well, then you have to investigate what's causing those numbers to go down. If there's a trend where we see monarch butterflies that go all the way from Canada down to Mexico, if we see a trend that monarch butterfly populations are down, what's the cause for that? Is it insecticides? What are we doing as a human population that might bring those numbers down? So populations are a big part of ecology. Okay. We get into populations later on in another chapter. Our own environment, just as human beings, climate change, like I said before, is a big hot topic. One of the hot topics that's not so hot anymore, but was for a while, was our own ozone layer. Ozone layer is high up in the atmosphere. It's just a protective layer. It happens to protect us from UV rays. There are planets out there that don't have that protection, and the UV radiation would be deadly at that point. But we depend on it, and for a while back in the 80s and 90s, we were not being very kind to it, and it started to thin way down and actually created a hole over Antarctica. Anyways, we've since put things in place. We've put laws in place and things like that that have started to allow that ozone layer to rebound. And as of now, it's a lot better. You'll see the term chlorofluorocarbons on there. That was one of the big things back in the 80s and 90s. It was a chemical that we used in a lot of different applications. And it was actually the thing that was most damaging to the ozone layer. And we discovered that, and once we discovered it, we put bans on CFCs, or chlorofluorocarbons. So anyways, ozone layer is doing better, but it's definitely something that we were looking at and that we have to keep looking at because we depend on it so much. All right. As far as climate change, it says here carbon dioxide and water vapor, they both reflect heat and direct it back on Earth. There's other chemicals that do that too. Methane is one. Methane is actually one of the hot ones right now because it's known that cows burp methane, and these huge giant cow farms we have throughout Colorado and western Nebraska, they expel a lot of methane, and it's not good for the atmosphere. We call this phenomenon the greenhouse effect. That's that blank right there, okay? I see him at about 5.5 minutes of 15, so I think I'm doing okay here. But yes, climate change, another hot topic. We have climate change deniers. I do happen to think that the science suggests that climate change is a real thing. And, you know, people look at these wind farms we have around us and they think they're unsightly. I think it's a progressive step. I think it's going to lead to something in the future that maybe the device isn't as big as they are right now. Maybe they don't take up as much space as they do. Those large flashing red lights, I mean, you look north and south of Maryville and that's all you see. And, you know, who knows, maybe in 5 years, those will progress to something else. And, you know, even solar's come a long way. We've got solar shingles we can put on our house now. So there's a lot of good things going on when it comes to climate change. And we discuss this in depth in a later chapter as well. All right, I'm going to keep moving on. You keep taking notes. All right, so it says sketch this, but really what I want you to do is I want you just to sort of maybe get the terms down and understand that these are all different levels that an ecologist might study. So if you're an ecologist and you're studying, let's say, the ozone layer, or you're studying the greenhouse effect on Earth, you're studying something on the biosphere level. All right, the biosphere level encompasses everything on Earth. And so the ozone layer that surrounds all of Earth, if you're somebody who's studying, an ecologist studying at that level, you're studying the biosphere level, okay? If you're simply studying how zebras interact with gazelles and lions on the African plains, you're talking about studying living organisms, different living species and populations. But you'll notice I didn't mention anything to do with non-living. I said, how do the zebras interact with the gazelles and the lions? So all three are living. That's at the community level, okay? So you might be an ecologist that studies on the community level. If you include the living and the non-living in an ecosystem, then you're at that level, okay? So basically, these are just different levels that ecologists might study at, okay? But go ahead and pause it and get something down that shows that the biosphere is all encompassing and it just slowly works itself down until you get all the way down to an individual. And you might be an ecologist that studies a single individual, okay? All right, I'm gonna move on. Each of these is defined right here, okay? So I'm not gonna read through each one. Go ahead and pause it, but understand that what I just sort of talked about on the last slide is all written here, and I'll ask you to get all that down, okay? Okay, I'm gonna let you pause it, and I'm gonna move on. Scientists use models all the time. And really, you know, if you looked around my room, if you're in my room right now, you'd see models all over the place. And we use models basically to study things that are maybe too grand or too small. For instance, you know, I've got models of the solar system. I've got a couple of those around. I've got model homes that we use in architecture that my civil engineering and architecture students have built. I mean, shoot, even the globe, right? Little spinny globe you find in a classroom, that's a model, okay? So we use models to sort of simplify things. We use models when it comes to weather. If you want to see what maybe a hurricane path is going to do, or if you want to see weather trends, and you know, who would have ever predicted it would have been 50 degrees when I got outside this morning? Models are what we use to do that, okay? They're using weather models from the past to go ahead and predict the future, okay? All right, moving on. I want you guys to be responsible for these two terms, okay? Biotic and abiotic factors. So in ecology, these are how interactions take place amongst, when I say biotic, I mean living things, And when I say abiotic, I mean non-living, okay? So you should be able to look at a picture or maybe go outside and be able to pick out all the biotic factors in an ecosystem and all the abiotic factors in an ecosystem, okay? I only gave a couple of examples, all right? But a lot of times when we talk about populations later on, we're going to bring up a number of abiotic factors that play a role in that population, okay? So we might look at something like salinity. Salinity is how salt the water is, maybe in an ocean, all right? And the fish in that ocean require a very particular salinity, and when it gets outside of a certain range, their populations are affected. So that's just a simple example of how we might look at biotic versus abiotic factors, okay? I'm almost at 11 minutes here. I got to keep going. So here's a picture, and I'd like you to be able to look at that and be able to pick out all the biotic things that are within that picture and all the abiotic things, the things that maybe, for instance, that fish requires when it comes to that water, okay? There's oxygen in that water. What oxygen level does it require, okay? There's the sun, right? How much UV? Some plants require shade. These animals require a certain temperature to be, prosperous, okay? So biotic versus abiotic. All right, when it comes to energy, we kind of look at two ways that energy begins in an ecosystem and then extends throughout that ecosystem. And energy in an ecosystem begins with the sun. We know that plants use photosynthesis to create their carbohydrates, and then we eat those things, and then things eat us and moves up, sort of the food web. But there's a term that we refer to plants that do photosynthesize, and they are called autotrophs. AUTO is what belongs in that blank. So go ahead and get that down. But plants are known as autotrophs. All right. We also consider them primary producers. So that's our plants. For a long time, we thought that was the only way that ecosystems began and that food chains began, that energy began at the sun level, and the sun went ahead and started the cycle with the plants. We ate the plants and so on. But then it was discovered down in the bottom of the oceans that there's another way that ecosystems can begin, and this is through chemosynthesis. This is way down. They're called deep sea vents, and there's whole ecosystems well below where there's any light. And so there had to be something else that was prompting these guys to be able to sustain an ecosystem down there. And it was chemicals that the earth was producing and expelling. So that's chemosynthesis, all right? Consumers are not autotrophs, they are called heterotrophs, Hetero, all right? Those are all the different types of heterotrophs listed, okay? You should know each one. And if we look, we can see some of these here. We've got carnivores, right? We have an herbivore here. We've got an omnivore, something that eats both plants and animals, okay? This is known as a detritivore. It eats something called detritus, turkey vultures or scavengers, all right? And we've got funguses here that decompose, so these are decomposers, all right? And then food chains exist within food webs, and so we'll look at energy flow. We'll look at how food sort of goes from the plants all the way up to what's known as a tertiary consumer later on this week, okay? Just a quick example of all the different animals and plants that might be in a food web, okay? And we'll talk more about these. And then an energy pyramid. Jot this down. We're at just over 14 minutes here, but go ahead and jot this down. We'll talk more this week, but if you have one in your notes, that would be super. And that's it, okay? So pretty good. We got through that in 14 and a half minutes. If you've got to go back and pause and get any notes, please do that. But have this ready for class the next time we meet, okay? All right, see you guys.